The Tape. Israel doesn't want you to see. Ein Video, das gestern erschienen ist und von dem ich noch nicht ganz genau weiß, was uns erwarten wird. Ich kann nur so viel dazu sagen, immer wenn, also das, was Israel uns sehen lässt, reicht eigentlich schon aus für mich, um zu sagen, weiß ich nicht, Diggi, Israel nicht so eine geile Sache. Aber wenn es jetzt Sachen gibt, von denen Israel nicht will, dass wir sie sehen, dann kann das unter Umständen harter Tobak werden. Deswegen schauen wir uns das an.
September 1992, Beersheva, in Israel's Negev desert. An independent American Fulbright researcher comes to document minority communities. He quickly runs into a set of facts the official paperwork doesn't capture. Native Bedouin villages classified as unrecognized. Homes demolished nearly one every other day, and terror applied through raids and livestock confiscations to force families into the official towns. Trained in ethnographic fieldwork, he lives with Bedouin communities, bringing a high-8 camera to film beyond the boundaries of his grant. The tape becomes an archive of 120 hours of procedures and testimonies, Bedouin families describing life under harsh environmental conditions and state neglect and coercion, and even Israeli officials describing how that system works. He returns to the United States with the tapes, expecting broadcasters, publishers, and human rights institutions to be interested in it. He gets silence instead. After years of pitching and dead ends, he stops trying, and the tapes sit largely unseen for more than 3 decades. Only recently, at the end of 2025, the creator digitized the archive and began releasing it online. What emerges from these unseen tapes is the Bedouin story from the inside. We'll trace how the footage was made, why it disappeared for decades, and how you can help bring the complete archive into public view.
Deutsche Untertitel. Der Kanal heißt Fenster. Ich verstehe sowieso nicht, warum der nicht Deutsch spricht. Fenster ist ja, naja, gibt nur Englisch.
Much of this video's research is based on a first-person publication the filmmaker himself wrote in 1998 for Americans for Middle East Understanding. Link in the description. Ronald Kelly, who goes by Ron in his own writing, describes himself as a photographer trained in anthropology, a visual ethnographer. Before Israel, he had already worked in immigrant and Muslim communities in the United States. In 1991, at 40 years old, he photographed Kurdish refugee camps in Iran for Relief International, and his work later appeared in major venues like the Smithsonian in Washington. He enters Israel through a year-long Fulbright Fellowship in 1992 to 93. His host institution is Ben Gurion University in Beirut.
Ich muss jetzt nochmal in die Untertitel, dann kannst du sagen Deutsch. Okay, warte. Okay, gut. Machen wir. Bitteschön.
Beersheva. His mission is specific. Photograph 3 minority communities and track social change inside each one. According to Kelly, that list includes Ethiopian and Russian Jewish immigrants and the indigenous Negev Bedouin. He lives in the desert on a kibbutz, a collective community, part farm, part village, organized around shared work and shared property.
Internet ist für Karl Neuland. Nee, darum geht's nicht, aber für englischsprachige Videos schalte ich relativ selten deutsche Übersetzungsuntertitel an. Das ist eher der Grund.
In his account, it is an all-Jewish space, with rare exceptions, himself as a non-Jew and a rotating set of foreign volunteers. The resistance shows up early. Kelly says he learned that 2 senior academics at Ben Gurion had lobbied against his Fulbright award. Kelly says the objection centered on the subject matter. A photographer spending time with the Bedouin could document state policy in the Negev in ways the university did not want associated with a Fulbright project. Then comes a second signal, more concrete. His academic host describes a deal. The Jewish agency would pay the university $15,000 for rights to use Kelly's photographs of Ethiopian and Russian immigrants for promotional purposes. Kelly notes what the offer excludes. There is no interest in Bedouin photographs. Kelly then decided to refuse the arrangement and keep control of the material. Around the same time, Kelly begins hearing what he calls disturbing stories about Bedouin treatment in the Negev. He says the stories were horrible enough that he decided to document them on videotape. He does not announce this to his Jewish Israeli academic hosts. He expects the project could be stopped or sabotaged once word circulates, so he keeps it quiet. Access comes through people. Kelly's kibbutz and university connections bring him into contact with Bedouin communities. As he follows one account to the next, he meets a Bedouin man he describes as unusual, born in Israel, educated in Europe, living overseas, fluent in English, Bedouin Arabic, and Hebrew. The man, who goes by the name of Hassan, leads many interviews in Arabic and becomes the bridge between Kelly's camera and Bedouin residents willing to speak. By the end of the fellowship, Kelly leaves with a large archive. He describes it as about 100 hours on tape and later puts the figure at 120 hours in print. It's the accumulation of a year, conversations, visits, interviews, and the repeated routines of a system. Even in what Kelly has released so far, the pattern is clear. A traumatized community living under constant pressure, surfaced through small moving stories. The tapes show patrols arriving without notice, families rebuilding after removals, lives shaped by permits they can't obtain and services that don't come, and officials explaining the rules that make enforcement possible. Kelly is at Kibbutz Retamim during the last phase of its 10th anniversary celebration. Inside the fence, the kibbutz stages a public narrative of success in the desert. Outside, roughly half a mile away, Bedouin families sit after receiving final eviction notices.
Ich frage mich immer, wie viel Propaganda über dich einbrechen muss, dass du in der Lage bist, wenige Meter von so einer Räumungszone irgendwelche beschissenen Festivitäten stattfinden zu lassen und wie du das ja offensichtlich irgendwie mit anschauen musst und dir dabei nichts denkst. So, wie die Rechtfertigung für dich da irgendwie zusammengeeiert wird in der Birne. Es passt natürlich jetzt nicht 1:1, ne? Aber der Vorgang ist, ich versuche mir das immer so zu erklären, ne? Weil Empathie ist ja immer, wenn man etwas selber mal miterlebt hat, dann kann man sich das irgendwie ein Stück weit besser vorstellen oder erklären. Und ich versuche es mir immer so mit unserem Umgang mit Obdachlosen zu erklären. So, uns wird ja irgendwie von der Gesellschaft relativ eindeutig klar gemacht, dass Obdachlose diese selbstverschuldeten Versager sind, die, wenn man ihnen Geld gibt, das sofort für Alkohol ausgeben. Also dir wird ja aktiv eingeprügelt, kein Mitleid mit Obdachlosen zu haben. Obdachlose sind selbstverschuldet, die haben selbst Schuld daran, die können Hilfe kriegen, wenn sie das wollen und du musst da nicht helfen. Das ist eine eigene Entscheidung. Ne? Niemand muss obdachlos sein und wenn du denen hilfst, dann am meisten hilfst du ihnen, wenn du sie ignorierst. So, nach dem Motto. Und auch da hatte ich immer ein beschissenes Problem mit. Einfach.
The Bedouin you have just seen were forcibly evicted off their ancestral lands, 1/2 mile away, Kibbutz Retamim, one of the many Jewish settlements built on confiscated Bedouin land, celebrated their 10th anniversary day and night with movies, dancing, feasts, and songs written for the occasion. In the 1970s, Israeli authorities began creating towns to concentrate them. Today, there are 7 such segregated Bedouin urban areas. For the past 20 years, Israeli planners have continued to enforce a policy of economic and social strangulation, as well as eviction, to push the unwilling Bedouin into these towns so that the Arab desert becomes Jewish.
The purpose of this town, really, to have the Bedouin as a cheap labor for the neighboring Jewish towns. The government doesn't plan these towns to be self-sufficient. There is no planning for industrial state, there is no planning for anything.
ولا بدوي وهذا أنا بفكر كل بدوي لو بتقعدوا مع
There's not a single Bedouin who went to these townships of his own free will. It was because of the policy of harassing them everywhere, tearing down their houses, stealing their lands. Where can he find shelter? They persuade people.
Kelly drives to one campsite with a Bedouin interpreter. A young boy is hiding behind a water tank. When he realizes he's been seen, he runs. Kelly records the moment. The interpreter calls him back. He keeps running into the desert.
They stop their jeeps and beat them. The children also know the livestock they are herding is likely to be confiscated. Our homes are also demolished. Now he's going to hide in the desert where no one can find him. Even if you look for him in your car, you won't find him. It's fear.
Does he think we're Jews?
Of course. He thinks you're the Green Patrol.
Another glimpse shifts from group removal to a single household, Fathia Abu Gardoud. Kelly describes a meeting a few miles south of Sid Boker. The person who speaks to him is Fatia, a widowed Bedouin woman living with her grown son and his family in an isolated tent. She has just lost her last court appeal to remain where she is. She tells Kelly her family has lived in that area since Turkish times, referring to the Ottoman Empire, and she says she has papers to prove it. She expects the troops to come again. Kelly describes the day as an inventory of survival. With her son away tending sheep, she takes over the work normally assigned to men. She manages food, water, and the small decisions that keep a family on the land one more week. Fathia builds a small earthen dike to channel rainfall into a garden. Israeli authorities arrest her for harming state land and ruining the environment. She goes to jail. She is taken without her shoes. A few weeks after Kelly meets her, she is forcibly evicted. She refuses to move into a government-assigned town. She joins a small protest camp in Jerusalem across from the Knesset, trying to force public attention onto a private system. When Kelly leaves Israel, she is still there, waiting for what she calls the simplest request, to be left alone. In the United States, Kelly tries to do what independent filmmakers did before platforms and direct uploads. He turns raw tape into a finished film and then looks for a broadcaster, a festival, or an institution willing to show it. He says he bought his own editing system and assembled it in his bedroom. To translate the Arabic interviews, he flew a Bedouin teacher to America, paid him, housed him in a one-bedroom apartment, and worked through the footage line by line until he had usable English transcripts. Once the film exists in a form that can be screened, Kelly starts taking it to gatekeepers in person. He visits Jewish organizations with the tape in hand. He goes looking for anyone with a slot, a budget, or a willingness to take the risk. He runs into a wall. Kelly names PBS, ABC, an Arab Jewish Peace Foundation, and all sorts of media organizations and festivals. He also says that many Arab and Muslim Americans he contacted showed little interest. He adds that he personally visited Jewish organizations with the tape in hand and was immediately shown the door. The response is near total disinterest. After spending $25,000 and thousands of hours, he still can't find a single institution willing to screen it. Kelly's film puts Israeli state policy at the center of the story, and in the United States, that subject is treated as institutional risk. In the United States, mainstream media runs through concentrated ownership, advertiser and donor dependence, and gatekeepers who manage risk for these institutions. Films that document Israeli state policy's actions can be treated as a liability. Kelly's experience is what that system looks like in practice. The work exists, the evidence is there, and the institutions that shape public narrative still decide to bury it. Decades later, the conditions have changed. Kelly is now about 75. The gatekeepers that shut him out in the 1990s no longer control the only route to the public. He has digitized the archive, published his finished 2-hour documentary on YouTube for anyone to watch, and begun releasing more of what he filmed. In the same spirit, he has also started posting a separate body of work, a long series of interviews with Jewish scholars and commentators, over 60 in total, recorded across the United States. He frames the series in the orbit of dissenting voices on Israel and U.S. power, figures like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein. Links to the documentary, the archive releases, and the interview series are in the description. We reached out to the creator with follow-up questions while preparing this film, but did not receive a response. And that leaves a final question. If a record this extensive could be buried in plain sight for decades, then how much else has been filtered out, forgotten, shelved, or destroyed before it ever reached public view?
Das ist, glaube ich, so das einzig. Nee, den Satz kann ich so nicht zu Ende bringen. Ich glaube, immer mehr Menschen beschäftigen sich mit Israel, dem Staat Israel in seiner Gesamtheit und Geschichte und stellen fest, mein lieber Herr Gesangsverein, wie kann ich eigentlich seit x Jahren auf diesem Planeten sein und das noch nie mitbekommen haben? Wenn es doch so offensichtlich vor unseren Augen verfügbar gemacht werden kann. Ich meine, ich nehme mich da ja nicht selber aus der Verantwortung raus. Ne? Ich glaube, vor dem Völkermord in Gaza habe ich auf den Nahen Osten angesprochen, auch immer so den standardisierten, das ist kompliziert und da sollten wir uns besonders als Deutsche raushalten, Talk rausgeknallt. Ich glaube, das ist dann so, das ist das, was gelehrt wird und das ist der gesellschaftlich akzeptierte Umgang mit dem Nahostkonflikt. Und dann schockiert es eigentlich, wenn man anfängt mal sich mit der ganzen Sache zu beschäftigen, was da eigentlich für ein offensichtlich widerwärtiger Rattenschwanz dahinter hängt. Und wie unmöglich es dann, wenn man das weiß, erscheint, das jemals irgendwie als eine komplizierte Angelegenheit gesehen zu haben. Wisst ihr was? Also das ist ja auch das Ding, ne? So, ich bin auch immer so schockiert, wenn andere Leute sagen, ja, ist kompliziert oder ja, weiß ich nicht, will ich mich nicht so äußern oder was. Auf der einen Seite schockt es mich, auf der anderen Seite denke ich mir, ist halt der normale Umgang damit. So wie Nachbarn, die Gras an oder von Rechten verticken. Diggi, ich glaube, das ist kein richtig guter Vergleich. Niemals aufhören, alles zu hinterfragen, vor allem Gelerntes oder Anerzogenes, fangt einfach an. Ist ein guter Hinweis, aber ich glaube, in dem Fall trifft es den Kern auch nicht so ganz richtig, weil das wurde einem ja auch nie wirklich beigebracht. Ne? Da gab es ja gar nichts zu hinterfragen, weil man selbst kein Wissen darüber besessen hat. Also Leute, die sich hinstellen und sagen, das Thema ist kompliziert, haben sich ja noch nie mit dem Gegenstand beschäftigt. So, du hast gar kein Wissen über das, was da passiert ist. Ansonsten kannst du dir das ja nicht schönreden. Das geht ja gar nicht. Du musst komplett ahnungslos sein, um zu sagen, dass es ein kompliziertes Anliegen ist. Naja, schon klar. Aber warum ist es überhaupt kompliziert? Warum es kompliziert ist, die Antwort wird dir ja mitgeliefert. Und das ist eine Erklärung, die, glaube ich, bei den allermeisten Deutschen fruchtet. Da heißt es, wir haben eine besondere Verantwortung jüdischem Leben gegenüber, weil wir oder unsere Vorfahren oder unsere Nation oder unser Volk, nennt es wie ihr wollt, für den Holocaust verantwortlich sind. Und aus diesem Grund haben wir uns in diese Anliegen nicht einzumischen oder wir haben uns zu diesen Anliegen nicht zu äußern. Und wann immer der Holocaust in den Diskurs gebracht wird, ist der Diskurs tot. Das ist das ultimative Totschlagargument. Holocaust heißt Ende. Hier an diesem Punkt ist Schluss mit Diskurs. Machst nichts. Wenn man nur die deutschen Medien konsumiert, klingt es ja auch kompliziert. Ich frage mich eher, nee, auch das nicht. Auch das nicht.
Ruinen und der Zukunft zugewandt, lass uns dir zum Guten dienen, Deutschland, einig Vaterland.
Nö. Auch wenn man nur die deutschen Medien konsumiert, ist das nicht kompliziert. Nicht kompliziert.